Hey, this is Tash LC.
Hi, I'm Kampire.
And we are here together today having a chat about digital digging culture, changes in the industry, DJing, and our relationship to music discovery and curation. And we're also celebrating Kampire's brand new compilation, A Dancefloor in, is it Ndola?
Yes.
Yes.
It's been really nice to have everyone pronounce it correctly the first time because it's a struggle with my name. Everyone's like, Kampire, Kampire. They're like, what is your name exactly? Like, I'm forever correcting people that it's Kampire. So it's really nice that people just got A Dancefloor In Ndola correct immediately.
It's such a nice title as well. Did you come up with that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a bit of chat about it, and I'm really not good at coming up with titles, but like the concept and the imagery behind the compilation were really where the conversation started, which was about the music of my childhood, and the various inspirations that I still reference in my DJ sets today. And yeah, being a Ugandan, born in Kenya, but growing up in Ndola, Zambia, and sort of the Christmas parties and the music that my parents, who were like immigrants, expats, would listen to. That was really like the idea behind the compilation. So at Dancefloor In Ndola, like those Christmas parties, being paid a few thousand kwacha to like dance for the adults who are drunk on Christmas
Is that
Eve.
what happened?
Yes,
Sick.
yes. One of the cool things, like the response to the compilation, was someone commented on Instagram and they were like, yeah, we also got paid a few pounds to dance for the adults at Christmas parties. So it's good to know this is like a universal experience.
Yeah, did you you end up like connecting with people that were also grew up in Zambia?
That was another really cool thing, was like people commenting and being like, oh, I grew up in Ndola, or I can't believe you're putting Ndola on the map, because it's a tiny town in the copper belt of Zambia. It's not even a capital or anything. So it really feels meaningful.
It's also just, such a really, really beautiful cover, and the story is really cool. And it took 4 years to put together.
Mm-hmm.
You must have got a bit impatient.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely very impatient. We started talking about it during the pandemic, when everyone kind of had more time and was like thinking about projects and like filling their time. And we didn't imagine that it would take quite this long. So I'm sure Strut had some idea, having done this kind of work with like classic African music and all the struggles of licensing before. But I don't think either of us imagined that it would take 4 years to get here. And we must have been through like a couple of hundred tracks before we landed on the 12 or so that you hear on the record. So yeah, it took a really long time. And when you've just been talking about it in your head and in your inbox, it doesn't, like, you sort of lose the cloud or lose the feel for the music and what it means and how it exists outside of your head. So it's been super, super gratifying to like have people respond. My friend Darlene played it on the release date at a party in Kampala, and like people got up and danced. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even like imagine this 4 years ago. So I'm really, really thrilled.
That must have been so sick. So I saw the picture of you opening out the box. That must have been such a sick thing.
It's real. It's real
now. Well, today we're talking about like digging culture, aren't we? And buying vinyl and digging and our history with it and our relationship with it and stuff. And like, I think for people like us that don't really, you have like a couple remixes out, but that don't necessarily like produce as like a main thing, it must be like having like a physical record. It's like, so cool.
Yeah, I was like, I can see how producers like really get addicted to this feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I need to do this again. Because, it's outside of your head now. People are interacting with it. People are writing about it, talking about it, dancing to it. I understand the appeal now.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've got my little test pressing, so I'm excited to get into it when I get home. I think we're going to start out and just chat a bit about ourselves, aren't we? And say who we are, our route into DJing, and like our genre. Our styles, our energies on the dance floor, what we like to play, what we like to listen to.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I really wanted to have this conversation with you is that you're one of the few Black women that I know. There's probably like 5 or 10 of them who like are really into collecting records, both digital and physical. And yeah, we've talked a little bit about like the physical experience of having a record in your hand. And when I was growing up, there were like no record shops. There's never even been like a record pressing place in Uganda before. So yeah, how did you get into like the physical experience of records?
I've been DJing now since like 2015, so almost 10 years. And I think I maybe bought my first record like in maybe like 2016, 17. I can't remember exactly what it was. But through an ex-boyfriend actually, and he would buy a lot of records, and then I kind of started buying records, and trying to remember like what I first bought, but I remember just that feeling was so significant. And like when I first started out, like my main sort of, I guess, obsession was sort of old school 60s, 70s Afro stuff, high life, soukous, like Congolese, Nigerian, Ghanaian music. And though that was the first music that I first started buying on vinyl was high life, and I think it felt so specific because it was music that just made sense being on vinyl, and because it kind of, a lot of that sort of like that era of music, it kind of transports you to somewhere else. And I felt that when I was like had a physical record, that's what it did for me too. It was the crackles and the feeling and the energy and like the old covers and like the vintageness of it. And so I started sort of buying like records here and there around that time, and then sort of stopped on and off, and then started like buying again a few years later, and then now I like buy records like super regularly, and it's just such a like different feeling to me than digging online. And I just find like I love buying old music specifically because I exist in my head a lot, and I'm very much like a daydreamer, and I just get like, as I said, very transported by buying old music because it kind of takes me there. I can imagine like the record being pressed. I imagine the dance floor, the energy, and just the fact that like, you know, you're thinking about 60s where you didn't have MP3s and like you could have probably only have vinyl, and I think that's just so sick to have like a piece of that time. So yeah, it's been like nearly 10 years of buying music on wax.
And when you compare that to like the digital experience, you said that those are quite different for you.
Yeah, because it's a lot more present. And I even like, you know, when you go on like Bandcamp or you go on YouTube or wherever, you get so distracted. You're buying tunes, but then you're also on Instagram, and then you're also texting someone and sending a voice note. And whereas like when I go digging, I'm in a store, I'm like in it, like properly in it. It's like one of the rare moments in life where I get to be like present. And also, we're chatting earlier a bit about the conversations that you have with record store owners who can be mad grumpy, but also just getting to have like that interaction with someone, talking about the music, getting excited, feeling it, like looking for gems, and it's like an adventure to me. It really feels like an adventure. So but then I also kind of have that when I'm like on YouTube looking at, so a lot of the time I'll go on YouTube, look at archives and find like, make playlists, find like old school Benga or whatever, for example, then go on Discogs and maybe buy it there. But that also feels like a similar experience to digging, but like nothing is the same as like being in the store, you know?
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we didn't have vinyl culture like in any of the places that I grew up, except Nairobi, Kenya. And I've never really lived there except when I was 2 years old, but that's where like all the Congolese, Ugandan, Kenyan bands in the 70s would go, and they would go to Nairobi to like press records.
Yeah.
So even though like Congolese music at the time in the 70s and 80s it's like just the height of African popular music, even now, a lot of the influences from Nairobi and the contemporariness of Nairobi city at the time, and my parents and a lot of like people of their generation who were like either students or displaced because there was like a lot of political unrest in Uganda at the time. So a lot of them ended up in Nairobi, and so it was just really like this melting pot for culture and for music. So sometimes you'll hear, like my dad will talk about, or like you'll read references to like the Starlight Club in Nairobi, and that was where all the bands were playing. And I think that, especially with vintage records, that experience of like having the record just makes so much sense. Because it transports you back to that time in a way that digital really can't. But yeah, that was not my personal experience.
But it makes you nostalgic for a time that you didn't live in, right?
And it's only like, I also started DJing around 2015. And once I started DJing and touring in 2018, like people would just give me records.
Okay.
And I couldn't say no because, I mean, how cool is that? But I didn't even have a record player.
Yeah.
So it was only like a couple of years later that I was like, I need to get a record player to play all these records that people keep giving me. And then when you get to travel, that's when you get to like go to record shops. So now I have my little collection, which is still quite little, but like I'm really happy with it. And I love the listening experience of, putting on an album from start to finish.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's so many threads of things that I want to say that I don't want to get lost in it. But like one of the things that's so different and that has changed even within my lifetime is like the experience of listening to an album from start to finish. And when you talk about streaming services, like they don't even care, like artists don't, like, I think it was maybe Pink Pantheress was talking about like, you know, each song being a separate experience rather than like thinking about an album being a concept which people listen to from beginning to end. Like I think that's one of the things that's going to be lost as we go deeper into the streaming experience, because people just have their track that they love that they want to play 40 times.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, an album, no skips. Like that's become like such a rarer thing. So yeah, I really love how present it makes you and how present it is when you like sit down and play a record. It's such a physical experience.
It's such a physical experience. Like it's such a ritual for me. Like I'll light a bit of incense and then put something on, and then I'm kind of like getting dressed or like kind of like tottering about and then I've got to like go over and then flip it and then put it back on, and it is really physical. And you're like, again, it's like presence and like it's intention. And for me, it's like as someone who doesn't produce, I really feel bad for the fact that like so many producers, most of the music is just like thrown out into the ether, and then it's like one song, or like you got to like, you know, the amount of friends that produce that tell me they put out a body of work, and then like it's like, okay, cool, and then agents and managers are like, okay, what's next? And I'm like, oh my god, like, you just put in so much work into that, and like the bare minimum we could listen to the whole thing. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the way that you intended, but it's so hard to have control over that, and you're so much less likely to skip on a record, right?
Yeah.
And
that's another thing that has changed so much in recent years, is that like people put out, you know, a body of work that's so meaningful, and like tomorrow we're talking about something else, and like not just the album, not just the music, but like the visuals that come with it, the videos. Like people are putting out like whole flipping movies, and then like you scroll on to the next thing.
Literally scrolling on. It's so lit. Why did you feel like with the Dancefloor in Ndola, why did you feel like you needed to like archive those tracks?
Yeah, I mean, I think that since I started DJing, it really made me think about what makes me different. Especially once I started like getting booked internationally, like there's really this question of why you and what makes you different from like Mina or Tash LC or like your peers. And I realized that, it's your culture, your stories, the places that you come from. And I think when you come from like a colonized culture, like some of the tracks that I talk about on the compilation, like there's one track that's a Zambian kalindula song, and like that type of music was not considered cool when I was a kid. Like you couldn't even tell someone that you liked that kind of music, because like, there was TLC on the radio and we were all waiting up until midnight to hear like the first release of like the No Scrubs album or whatever. Like there was UK pop on the radio. And when you come from a colonized culture, you don't value your own culture the way that you value things from outside, basically, or things from the mainstream. So listening to a lot of like young producers, young East African producers, young African producers who I always want to play and promote and put in my sets, like what makes them different from like a producer who's in the US or the UK, right? It's your own like musical history and the culture in which you come from. And that doesn't mean that you have to like make soukous music, right? But that personal experience, that is what makes you different, is what's going to set you aside from like a producer in Brazil or a producer in London or wherever. So yeah, I think it's so important to preserve and appreciate and document and valorize like these unique cultures in which we come from. And it's so much harder coming from where we come from because we don't have the institutions, we don't have like the public radio, we don't have the museums, we don't have like the government oversight that ensures that these records get kept well. So yeah, this is something that like is unfortunately down to individuals, and it's in this interaction with like capitalism when you release an album or you work with a record label or you work with streaming services in order to make this accessible. But it's so important that these things live on.
And we said as well, like, the thing that always cracks me up is when you play it, say, predominantly like a techno festival or whatever, a house festival or like festival that isn't our sounds, and then there's like a couple of us playing and people are like hearing similar beats all day, and then you play it and then they're like, and again, it's the light bulb thing. They don't know that they want it until they hear it. And then they're like, oh, I'm moving in a different way now. What is this? I'm like, and I think, but a lot of the time promoters are afraid to take that risk, to have too many people playing with stuff. So it's easy just to have a couple of us, but just more. People want it. People want to move. People want the percussion. They want the rhythm. They want something different. Challenge people, open them up. And
yeah, so much. I think that one thing that's changing in terms of like people's music discovery is that people have very like individualized discovery processes.
Yeah.
Because now it's the algorithm, now it's streaming. Whereas when I was growing up, there was literally like one DJ who went to Jamaica and he came back with a CD, and like now everybody of that generation knows these like 20 songs.
Yeah.
Like it was literally a group project. Whereas now I think that it's such an individualized thing and people listen to different things. And like, I think that audiences are so ready for, even in the mainstream, for hearing like different things and things that challenge them and things that are from different places and things that have a story. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, yeah, East Africans go crazy for dance halls. I always love that. Like Uganda and like Kenya, like when I've been like mad. It's basically like being in Kingston. I love it.
Obsessed. And like the 90s, like Red Rat.
Yeah. They don't play.
Yeah, the stuff that you hadn't even like thought people listened to, but we love dancehall.
I love when Vibes came out, it was just all Kenyans in the comments. Oh, great. So yeah, I love that though. That's the like just like cross-continental shit that like I just find so sick. What else? I haven't looked at notes.
Well, I guess one last thing I wanted to say about digging before we like move on to other things.
Okay, so much I want to talk about.
I know, it's so much to talk about. But one of the other kind of experiences that I went back to in doing the compilation was one of the things that led me to DJing was being a university student in the US.
Okay.
And it was also around the time that YouTube was just like really doing its thing. And there was so much African music on there, which like just some, again, Colombian guy like posted a vinyl. And then in the comments, you'd be like, oh, we used to dance to this in 1984. Whatever club in Lubumbashi. And I think that's changed again because the internet has changed so much and everything has become so like industrialized and capitalized. But YouTube was the wild, wild west then. And it was so gratifying for me as like a student who was missing home and like wondering what my peers were listening to and dancing to be like, what are people listening to in Nairobi? Where I'd play like Ogopa DJs, which was this 90s Kenyan band, and just like dance by myself in my dorm room. And yeah, even now, like because of licensing and those issues, so many of those older records have been taken down from YouTube, but every once in a while you'll find like a treasure trove So yeah, we were talking about digging and where we dig, and maybe that can be the next thing that we chat about. But YouTube has been like, yeah, really, really instrumental in the whole thing.
YouTube is a huge source for me, like massive, like exactly. And what I love as well about digging on YouTube is looking in the comments, like you said, of these like old school tunes, like old Angolan stuff, old like Kenyan stuff. And then seeing the people like get so nostalgic and like, oh, I remember playing this and did that, and all the stories and like the anecdotes, and I read through those, and again I'm transported, and I'm like, oh wow, like, and I would have, if I didn't have that, I would have just listened to it with no context and been like, oh, this is just like a nice song, this is cute. And I love that. But then again, when you do have, and I follow loads of these channels that are like so dedicated to archiving tracks, and they'll have like just like a camera set up playing like a record, and then like every single video will be like hundreds of videos. And I love that. And you can tell it's some person who's like mad passionate about it. But then again, like monetization there's no like monetization coming from that for the artist if they're getting like thousands and thousands of views. But then I know that that's also coming from a place of passion and love for the like content creator who's doing that. But I think that, like, I feel like I get really like immersed into that world when I'm like doing YouTube archivey stuff, because there's just, again, so much on there that I wouldn't find anywhere else. And like that really informs my like knowledge of stuff, and then I go on like wormholes of, and that's the thing also with a lot of these old records, is like, even when I do want to find info, so a lot of the time I'll find something on YouTube, go and copy and paste it into Google, nothing.
Right.
Maybe there's a Discogs record, like maybe one Discogs release and no information, or maybe not even that. And then when you go so far onto like page 6 and it's just taking you to like Last FM and like random, and I'm just like, there's not even a Wikipedia. And then when you get to that point, I think it's like you're trying to do your due diligence, but what more can you do?
Yeah.
And that's a shame, because I feel like, I want to know more about this artist. I want to understand more about this track. But yeah, YouTube's been like, for digging for me, like really, really important. And like now what I tend to do is find stuff on there, make a playlist, maybe find it on Discogs, or like maybe then find it on Spotify or whatever. But I think, I'll always probably use YouTube for those reasons, because it's just, and the ease of access and how easy it is to upload and add content to this like unending archive. But again, because of that ease, stuff can easily so much can just get lost. And again, the artists, how are they benefiting from that bar? People just hearing the music, but outside of that, it's like there's no real control.
Yeah, the internet has opened so many doors for music and culture, but every day those videos are being taken down. And like you said, like some of the time this is the only
way that you're gonna find it.
Yeah, and it's just some dude's comments that you're like, oh, this is the artist, this is the context in which they came from, and it's not on the internet at all. And we really, like, if you're African, you really come from a culture that's just not documented in the West.
Yeah. And also but then again, in the same way that the reissue labels archive and do that work, like on a much simpler level, I guess those content creators are doing the same thing, but just not to the same extent. But yeah, I think like, YouTube I find like really, really important.
Where else do you dig?
I dig, obviously, physically in shops, Bandcamp. So I make Spotify playlists like every month. Obviously, Spotify is not the best for paying people royalties, like hot mess. But I just listen to it a lot for playlisting, for like Club Yeke playlists, and then I just find a lot on there, like a lot of new music. But then also, to be fair, a lot of old random stuff as well. And then I just make huge playlists every month, and then I'll like find the tracks, then go and research more about them a lot of the time. YouTube, Discogs, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, not so much now. And then I get sent a lot of promos, but predominantly every day Spotify, and then Discogs more and more now as well. What about you?
SoundCloud is still the GOAT for Brazilian music and Brazilian funk.
Brazilian funk is the GOAT for
I think that there are some like specific countries and cultures that have really kept platforms alive, and I hope SoundCloud knows how much they owe Brazil.
And the Portuguese Afro house sounds.
Yes, for sure. I do love YouTube for older African music, Bandcamp for like underground electronic producers, and I I'm always telling people, please put your stuff on Bandcamp so I can buy your music.
Please.
Like, people don't realize that when I am in Kampala, Uganda, so many things are just not available. And I can't even like buy music on Apple Music from Uganda. It's really crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not available in the region
At all. You can stream stuff, but you can't buy it. Which is just a giant pain. So I'm forever in people's inboxes like, please put it on Bandcamp.
Okay.
Please send me this track. Just always trying to like negotiate these things.
And that's something that I wouldn't have I'd take for granted and wouldn't even think about.
Right. I mean, there are definitely issues with streaming sites, huge issues with streaming sites. I'm really not a fan. But there are so many like young African artists who that's the only place they'll put their stuff is on DSPs. So like I'm mad about it, but like that's the only place that I can find this song is on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever.
Yeah, I make the playlist in Spotify, then I just go buy it all on iTunes. So then I feel like it's kind of counteracts the evil of the of like Spotify a bit, as much as possible. And also like financially, I spend a lot of money on buying music. Like Bandcamp, I probably have like a proper Bandcamp dig like every couple of weeks, and then at the moment it's been buying more like physical records. But yeah, every couple of weeks I'll spend like a decent amount on Bandcamp and just like go on a proper dig. And then until my Monzo's like, oh, you can't buy anything else. And then but generally like monthly, I think it's you just end up spending like a lot. But it's, as I said, it's something I never regret. Like if I can like contribute to an artist getting paid, no regrets.
Yeah. I love to think about it as like I'm buying my friends a beer.
Exactly.
So like I'll spend $2 to $5 on someone's single.
Where are you finding beer for £2? Not in London, girl.
Listen, you guys are struggling out
We're
here.
struggling.
But because the Ugandan currency is so shit that when I travel, I don't even like convert things in my head. I don't say this is 5,000 Ugandan shillings because it will just make me cry.
Yeah.
So I find out how much a beer is in London, and then I'll be like, oh, this thing is 2 beers.
Yeah. That's a good way to convert.
That's the friendly way of doing it. But yeah, I love to like say it's really like a thank you for creating this beautiful piece of art.
Definitely.
And whatever amount of money I can afford, I will give it for sure.
And do you feel like how do you kind of compare that with buying physical records and the price points? Like, do you find that you're less likely to buy vinyl because of price points, or do you just kind of not naturally buy records the same like amount that you would same
it's so
volume of that you would buy like digital music?
First of all, I can't even like ship things to Uganda.
Really?
So if I buy something on Bandcamp, it's just going to be like a nightmare to ship it to Uganda. So I'll either get it shipped to a friend in Europe and then I'll like pick it up when hopefully I'm here. But the things are just not accessible. And then occasionally I'll go, like when I travel to like Nairobi, we were talking about Jazz Hall in Lagos earlier, which is another record shop in Lagos. There's another group called Torobe Distribution in Dakar, Senegal. And then I go there and I'll find like a Diblo Dibala record that I'm absolutely obsessed with, and then I'll spend 50 euros on it and like cry a little bit inside, but it's so worth it. And it's like, it's our job, literally. And I think it's interesting to talk about the resources that we put into it, because there's this discourse about like DJs getting paid for playing music and producers not getting paid. And I always feel like you guys probably cannot be talking about me. Like, surely you're talking about like some EDM producer who gets paid $10,000.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Because when I see my Bandcamp and I see like Tash has like just been on a spree, I'm like
you're like, that girl's back pockets are empty. Like, is Tash eating this month? That's what you're thinking.
She's like on rice and beans for the rest of this month because she had to buy this
she should be.
record.
But that for exact, and I feel the same way because like I think we do give a lot back, and I think We are people who will actually try to do everything we can before it comes to getting a track for free. Obviously, promos are different, and like on SoundCloud, sometimes a lot of people put out like a hype edit thing, and I'm like I just want to pay for it.
Right.
On Bank, I'm going through like all those like pop-ups and all of that to get there, and I'm just like, girl. But sometimes you have no other choice. But I feel like outside of that, we will always just buy the music, and like I definitely do feel like I don't have that guilt of feeling like I'm not paying into producers, because it feels like to me like I try and give, so it feels like an exchange. But I'm sure there's thousands of DJs, like millions, whatever. I'm sure a lot of people don't do that, and like that's the people that I'm referring to. But I hope that that's a minority, because like it's so easy to find music to buy now, and there's not really. I'm not saying everybody's got the same access economically to be able to buy loads of music constantly, but where you can, and if you are able to, obviously.
I also think that people are deeply overestimating the number of DJs who are like getting paid
loads of money.
Any money, right? People who can make some kind of a career out of it are like very few and far between. Very few and far between. Most people are just doing it out of the love of it. So yeah, go get mad at those EDM DJs. Don't get mad at us.
Yeah. Point their anger in the right direction.
Right.
I want to look at the list because I feel like there's loads of interesting things that are on here, and I keep forgetting. Do you see a generational difference within DJing?
Wow, I feel like I want to ask you this question.
Okay.
I think that for me, like coming into DJing and DJing culture has been such an education, because it's just very different where I come from. And like nobody was making money, no one's becoming a superstar out of it. The style of DJing, when you come from East Africa, like the expectations of DJing are very different. So for me, I'm just like sort of learning about how the culture existed before me, and that like the context in which DJing and DJing culture comes from, and just how much contribution DJing itself has made towards like creating genres. Like, jungle or D&B, or these things that just wouldn't exist if there wasn't like dance music and dance music DJs. But yeah, I think that people complain these days. They're like, oh, everyone's a DJ. But I think that's great. Like, everyone should DJ.
Yeah.
More DJs, please.
That discourse has been so dominant, hasn't it? But like, I agree. I think if you can want to DJ, then DJ.
Yeah, please.
Generational differences, yeah, there are. But I love seeing, because I think with the conversations about inclusivity and gender and something that is often missed out, with class obviously is missed out a lot, but also age. And I think it's been really sick seeing like some older DJs coming through and smashing it. Like a DJ that's been doing really well. Some people like feel a bit marmitey about that. I think is just jokes. It's Fish 56 Octagon. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's like this older guy who started doing these like videos on TikTok and Instagram, like playing turntables, and he's just like funny. He wears a dressing gown, and he just like gets gassed about the tunes, and he's just become massive. And he's like a dad in his like maybe like early like 50s or whatever. And not so much about the music itself, but just that as a thing, I just think is really cool. And I think it also, because I've spoken about this a lot with friends, like, do we see ourselves still doing this at like 50 odd, or still touring intensely and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, well, if it still works for me and I'm still enjoying it, then yeah, like I would love to be able to still be doing this. I think that's sick. I'd love to see how much further this can go and how sustainable it can be. And like a lot of the DJs that I really look up to are older. I find like when I meet, especially like I met a lot of older black women, like DJ Paulette's like kind of had a big resurgence in her career recently, and that's been really cool to see. Like Annie Mac has kind of stepped down from doing radio and is doing these like perform midnight parties where they finish by midnight, so older people can go out and have a good time and don't feel so excluded from raving. Stuff like that I think is really cool. Like I'd still rate people like Giles Peterson massively. A lot of like and I just think that the fact that there can be like a huge range of ages within dance music and clubbing is super key, because we're learning from each other. And I think if everyone's like just Gen Z, and like I think it's just like there's diversity there, but like you can learn so much from that, age difference. And I think that's really cool. And I don't like the purity of like things were better in the whatever. But yesterday, actually, I was doing a workshop, and there was a guy in there that was doing this exhibition in the space. And it was he's a photographer, and he was documenting like rave protests in the 90s and like all these like anti-establishment like protest, and it was so sick, and like he proper encapsulated that time, and he was so passionate talking about it, and I was like, wow, like I would never have known that had you have not existed, like been around now and been older, having had gone through that. And we were speaking just about like the energy then, and these like illegal raves that would happen, and these like free parties out in Manchester in the countryside, and I was like, wow. And again, that being transported to that time, and I was like, wow, that's so sick. And I was just in awe of it. And he spoke about, you know, obviously there was like no phones, and you were just in it, and you could see the energy of these photos that people were just in it. They were living it. They were just like completely for it. They were like free spirited like hippies. And I was like, wow. And you know, I think that that's so sick. And he's still involved in music now, but his thing is more focused on archiving and like sharing the past, which is not that long ago, like 20 odd years, with people now. And I think that that's so cool. And like just shit like that I think is so interesting. So I think just like generational differences in like music is in our thing is like really, really important. Even like not even huge, that's not even like massive, that's like like 20 odd years difference. But I'm just rambling, but yeah.
No, it's so important. I also, like I said, I got into DJing late, and I come from like a different culture or tradition out of it. But I think that one thing that's super cool about DJing and dance music culture is that it's an alternative education. There are people so passionate about like ensuring that people remember their elders and remember where they came from. And even sometimes it comes out in like a shaming way. Like you young people don't know like who you owe or where this came from. Like educate yourselves. But I think that it's so important that there's alternative education streams, not to be like all like communist hippie or whatever. But I think that this reliance on like Western education traditions, everyone's like, if you didn't go to school, then like you're useless, basically.
Yeah,
there's other ways of being
to educate,
exactly.
100%.
And learning your history, and music is such a powerful way of doing that. So I think it's cool.
And also with that ties into the digging thing, doesn't it? Because I guess it's still very much, it's still seen as quite like an older kind of like thing. And I think it's cool seeing younger diggers, like younger collectors and selectors do it, like being super passionate about like the art form as well and stuff, and like archiving and playing vinyl and blah, 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 because I think it's a line of communication between like elders and younger people. And I just think it's cool that people are interested in like an older method of like playing music and like analog and all of that. And like the world evolves so quickly and everything's become very digitized and like AI'd and all of that. But there's still a lot that is still preserved and can still like exist alongside like intense rapid development, you know what I mean? So I think that's really cool.
Tell me about some diggers that you love and like look up to.
Oh, there's a lot. Who do I really love? I really like Asher G. He is a digger from here, but he's Jamaican descent, and he plays just proper expert on ska, rocksteady, Jamaican music, roots. I booked him a couple times for Club Yake, and he's just super sweet, like proper G. There's actually like loads of really good like reggae selectors on TikTok. So if you go on like live, and then you just scroll through, like I think I've got a bit of an algorithm now, but like I can't remember specific names, but I follow quite a few like older black guys from London who like, there's one of these guys that I follow, he just like has this like setup in his house, and he like just sits in his chair and he's just like putting on 45s, and people are commenting like, yeah, sick, and sending him roses and blah, blah, blah. And I just put it on the side on like a Sunday and just do what I'm doing. It's just on in the background. He just plays like bangers and he talks a little bit and he's just like toasting. And I love that. And like, he doesn't need to be like doing a boiler room or whatever. It's just, he's got a huge audience. It's just on TikTok, him sitting in his living room.
Love it.
So they're really cool. I love, who else do I really like? I really like Polly Ritmo. She's really cool. She's from London. She's from London, but she lives in London, and she plays like kind of like Brazilian, Latiny, African, Caribbean stuff. Who else do I love? Loads of people. I really love like Rosalie. You know Rosalie. He's from Curacao, and he archives a lot of like old Curacao and like Caribbean like music, like super knowledgeable, really on the ball. Loads of people. Coco Maria I love as well. She's so fun. She's like a real inspiration to, I don't know if you listen to her, like her radio shows, but she is so engaging and so bubbly and like upbeat, and just she really knows how to tell a story. And I love the way that before she puts on a track, she'll really give it some like context, and she'll be like, this is da-da-da-da from da-da-da, and then now we're going over to, and I feel like I'm on this journey, and that's what I'm always trying to build towards in my sets, is really like getting more comfortable on the mic and taking people through that journey. And like, I think it makes such a difference to how people just perceive a track, you know what I mean, and understand it, and I love that. Camille, I really love as well. Loads of people.
Yeah.
And you?
I mean, you've mentioned a bunch of people that I love, but also Snow.
I was gonna say Snow as well. Yeah,
Snow is amazing.
Snow's a G.
Nongi from Manchester, from South Africa by way of Manchester, and she has an incredible collection, and
So
she also
good.
like goes to a million shows and gets everyone to sign her vinyl.
Does she?
Yes, so she probably has one of the biggest collections of like signed.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's so
It's super cool.
sick. I love Snow.
I love Atia Khan, who's from South Africa.
Okay.
She plays vinyl and is a journalist as well, and like is really like knowledgeable about political context and cultures in which this music comes from. When I was in Colombia, I met this guy called Gregorio, who's fantastic and has a cool collection as well. And he, I think, also just started this thing a few years ago where he would just like show the record to the camera and then put it on vinyl, put it on the player and like play the thing, and became really big on social media.
Like super
randomly.
simple. Yeah, I love
exactly.
that.
So yeah, I really think that there's a huge audience for these things, which is not entirely like appreciated. That like, yeah, there are people who really want to hear this stuff, and it's not always about like centering the sexiest looking DJ or whatever. It's just like someone who people can connect with.
Yeah. And I also love with digging specific, or with playing vinyl, that you know, we play club sets a lot of the time, and it's like how much of a track you play, like a minute and a half maybe max, and then next, and again that thing of so much of the track being lost in that. And that's what I love about playing vinyl, is you've got a whole track, you're in it, you're immersed in it. Like Jambi is a cool example of a space. Have you been there? Yeah. No. Oh, they're in Peckham, and their whole thing is like a one stack sound. So it's like it's only one turntable, one record at a time, and then you take it off, next one. So you're playing off track in full, everyone's vibesing off, bit of silence, next track. So you're like paying full attention to the track in the same way that you would listening to like a whole album. And I think that's also something that's really cool about it. Obviously, I'm talking about selectors more than people that mix vinyl, but I think that's also cool, and just allows the music to exist for longer and like more intentionally, which I really like as well.
Some vinyl record labels that you follow?
Who do I follow? This is one of those things I'm not going to be able to think when you ask me on the spot.
No.
So many people. Reissue wise, Analog Africa I love Awesome Tapes. Nyege are like a newer, I guess they're like it's new stuff, but I love Nyege. Who else do I love? Silat, I really love.
We were just talking about them.
We were.
As like one of the few like African family owned
records.
labels.
Which I didn't know, because I met a guy in Italy who works for them, and we spoke about it, but actually I didn't realize that it was still African. That's really sick. It was still African owned. And they've got a great archive on YouTube.
Incredible.
Really, really good. Loads of Congolese stuff.
The soukous guys from Marseille.
Soukous are really cool. One of my favorite labels is called Ndola, Ngola, and they put out like the most beautiful like merengue and samba from like 60s and 70s. I don't know who really runs it now. There's a cool channel on there's loads of cool like YouTube channels, isn't there, as well, that like put out. Studio One are incredible reggae, like iconic reggae label. Jammies.
There's this Colombian label that I'm going to be kicking myself for not remembering what they're called.
Palenque?
Yeah, Palenque.
Yeah, love Palenque.
Amazing.
Like every single release is like, and there's so I've spoken to, what's his name? He runs it. He's so nice.
Yeah, I met him in Medellin, I think.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, fantastic people.
Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nice. There's so many, so many good labels.
Yeah, dope people also. Like there's this idea I think when you come from outside of these circles, that you won't necessarily be welcomed, or that people will be like gatekeepy, or like, again, this whole like stereotype of like the grumpy old owner of a record shop. But people have been so nice and like so generous with their time and their knowledge, and have like sent me records.
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah, if you're afraid to start, don't be, because you really feel like you're part of something.
You do. And do you not feel like, I think when I speak to like label people and label owners and stuff, I feel like I'm kind of like in this separate world that's like different to the club world. And like, I love building those relationships and talking to people because it's just a very different experience. Do you know what I mean? And like the kind of communication and the way you talk about music is very different. And like, I just feel like, I feel like this is like a different type of music friendships that I have with those people than I do. And it's nice. I feel like I can be a lot nerdier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that loving music, there's many sort of areas in the industry in which you can enter. And like sometimes people enter into like the club music space, and which is great and super fun. But like a lot of times some of those people are like kind of cracked out, or like in it for the clout, or they're really great people, but you've kind of like aged out, or you are in a different phase in your life.
Yeah.
Or like you want to have different conversations. And I think that it's really warming or important to know that if you're in a different phase in your life, but you still love music, like there's still entry points. There's still people who are older. There's still longer, deeper conversations. If you're a sober person or you don't go clubbing or whatever, like there's still room for everybody.
I also feel like we've been speaking a lot about old vintage stuff, and I wondered what you thought about new music, electronic music, club music being on vinyl, like the necessity of it, and whether that's something that like interests you.
I think it's fabulous. But I don't personally DJ on vinyl yet. So it's not something that I've like super gone into. And I also think that like it's cost prohibitive for a lot of people to be like collecting on vinyl. It's like bad for your back.
I know, when I see people with the like 4 like trolleys and like traveling, I'm like,
I have so much admiration for people who like DJ that way. I think it's super cool. But like, yeah, it is a form of like archiving. And I think that the way we've seen how things can exist online and then be pulled down, having like a physical copy of something is so much more meaningful nowadays, because like all these digital whatevers are not gonna last
exactly forever. I think so too. And I really love when music that shouldn't is right, but hasn't traditionally existed on vinyl or in physical does. Like one of my most important records I have is DJ Zenobia's Inventor Volume 1. And I just feel like music like that being on vinyl, it's just like hasn't been a thing before. Like, so I don't really buy that much electronic music on vinyl, but certain things I will, because I'm like, that is like an archive. That feels like a piece of history that like that hasn't before but now does, and that's so cool to have it in that format.
Yeah, I think it's really important with people like Zenobia. I spoke about Ekuka earlier. Like this, because Africans, and I'm here like speaking in generalities, but like because music is such a part of like people's lives, like you just produce music and put it out there, and like things that came out in the early 2000s, like you just put it on whatever MP3.
And yeah.
Never heard from again. But these are the people who like invented genres.
Literally.
So to have that documented somewhere is, I think, really important.
Agreed. And I'm like for example, with Zenobia, like there's going to be more volumes, I believe, of his, and I'm so excited about that, because like exactly like the amount of music that he's made and would just be out there in like, and now it's going to be, I think that's really cool.
Okay, let me ask you.
Okay.
What's your favorite record in your collection right now?
Right now, I would say, what is my favorite record right now? Maybe there's a record by, I did like another thing, and I spoke about this record already. But there's a record by this artist called Carnival by, oh my god, what's the name? My brain's gone blank. Not Antonio, Arte Adriano, which is like a 1960 60s or 70s, like merengue, Angolan merengue track. And it's just like insanely beautiful. And I play that like a lot and I really love it. I feel like that's like maybe like number one. Actually, no, my number like one is like this compilation of Angolan music from the 60s, which is like all this beautiful like merengue and samba. And it's just like my most favorite songs in the whole world. And I love that. But at the moment, I've been playing generally a lot of 90s dancehall. That's like I love 90s dancehall. I buy so much of it on vinyl. And it's mad because it's normally like super cheap, especially 45s. They're like £3-4 in a lot of places. So I buy loads. So I've been buying like a lot of 90s. And a lot of the time it's not just it's the instrumentals, the vocals okay, but it's the instrumentals banging. So a lot of like Mafia and Fluxy Steely and Clivey stuff. Yeah, that's like, at the moment, that's what I listen to a lot. And there's one of my favorite dancehall track is a track called Number 2 by Terra Fabulous. And the instrumental was also so good. And like, I just think 90s is just, for me, dancehall like has not gotten any better since then. Like, I do love it still, but I just think for me, that is just that decade.
The peak.
Untouched. Untouched. So yeah, at the moment, a lot of 90s dancehall. And always like soukous and stuff as well.
Love it.
And you?
Well, like I said, my collection is still a baby collection.
Do you have like a favorite? Do you have like a favorite record that you have?
But I am obsessed with Diblo.
I love Diblo, yeah.
And like all his various bands that he was in. They called him the machine gun because the way he played the guitar was like so fast. And yeah, for me, like you're talking about the peak, 90s Congolese soukous.
Yeah.
It's so danceable, so good.
And it's gone.
Yeah, my dad was also obsessed with Franco and TPOK jazz.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of like beautiful love songs that I'm trying to collect, expand my collection.
Beautiful. It's actually like really interesting you saying before about the access is a big reason why you don't have a lot of records. And something I never thought about was just like the actual logistics of just getting stuff delivered to Uganda is a myth. And that was something I wouldn't have even thought about.
Yeah, it's like not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, access is a huge thing. And I think that's a big part of why you don't see like vinyl diggers from Africa. I think that there's this idea that like, oh, African people don't appreciate their own music or don't want to archive or whatever. But like these modes of archiving or documentation are Western modes of archiving and documentation. And like the modes that we had have largely been destroyed by like capitalism and globalization and colonization. And people are still just like so much poorer than in the West.
Yeah.
And even things like receiving things on the post is like impossible. So like there's so many barriers to it. So yeah, this idea that Africans don't want to document their own culture or don't appreciate their own culture, I think is nonsense.
And I actually think that that's actually like a real like well for me because it's something that, yeah, as I said, I hadn't thought about and like, yeah, obviously. And again, just makes you think about even though finance economically, you know, things can be an issue, but still like access, being somewhere like here and being from London, like just the privileges. Like I literally can just like go outside here and go to a record store like Honest John's is downstairs.
Yeah. And yeah, like even the older people who have record collections, like it's so impossible to find them. Things haven't been kept well. Yeah, we talked about how there weren't any like record pressing plants in Uganda. Like there've never been any record pressing plants. So yeah, it's a very different landscape.
And I guess like like a lot of Congolese artists would have gone and made records in like Paris, whereas
exactly,
where would Ugandan artists have like what was that diaspora?
Nairobi. Probably.
Nairobi. Yeah. What do you think makes a good digger?
What makes a good digger? Passion, curiosity. One thing I struggle with is like talking to strangers.
Really?
It's not one of my strong points. But I think, yeah, if you can go into a record shop or just like talking to someone on the bus or whatever and just being curious about people, is like a huge benefit, because those are the stories that you get that you wouldn't get otherwise, I think.
Yeah, I think curiosity, open-mindedness.
Yeah, and loving music for the sake of like music, like not having any of these barriers that we have in our mind, like, oh, it's Portuguese music, so I'm not into it or whatever. But you just like, it does something to you physically, and
you feel it, yeah. I sometimes wish I was more open to certain, because I feel like I'm like, when I go to like a store, I'm like straight to the African section, the Caribbean section. I'll maybe look at other stuff, but I'm like beeline, and I'm trying to start to look more at house and techno and more electronic stuff. But I'll always be like, okay, I'll look after them, but I have no time, and then like, I don't. But I'm just quite like, so even though I would say that I'm open, I can still be relatively boxed in. So I do really respect people that are fully so open to everything. And I know a few people like that, but it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people.
Right. And I think that we need you in our corner. Like, there's so few.
I know, no, I'm not leaving. I'm not abandoning ship. Don't worry, I'm not abandoning ship. I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I could find little gems over there that like I wouldn't have thought of before. But I'm like, I know what I like. You know what I mean? Do you feel like that?
Yeah, and I think one thing you've said about openness and curiosity, but also like being generous about it. Because I think that there's a way that some people nerd out and they're like gatekeepy about it. They're like, oh, you have to prove your credentials before I'll share with you or whatever. But then there's some people who are just like, I just want to talk to you about like my nerdy interests.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to anybody about my nerdy interest. And I really appreciate that like spirit of generosity.
I do. And the amount of people that like I've met and just had great conversations with in stores, like places that, for like Tabata I spoke about earlier, for in Lisbon, and I was in there for hours when I last went, and there was just people coming in and out. I met this guy called Sasha, who was really nice. People I was just chatting to. I was like just acting like I worked there. I was like part of the furniture, and then just like little chats. And then someone's dad came in, like the owner's dad came in, we were chatting to him, and then just like have like, and they just posted up like wasn't being rushed out, just take your time, like have like a chill, have a drink. And I love those experiences because it's a hangout and it's a social space and there's no pressure to buy anything. It's just nice to have like, yeah, human interactions.
And those slow interactions are not encouraged by the world that we exist in. So I feel like, yeah, vinyl record stores are one of the last bastions in which you can just like sit in there.
So be nice. If you own a record store, you work there, just please be nice and just don't be a dick. There's no need. Please just chill out, because some people like really value those interactions and like don't get that much of it. So it means a lot. And buy a Dancefloor In Ndola out now.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay.